Good evening, Dave Corja, on sort of Vulture Creative Rogan up on shop. You often get little technical challenges on these occasions. We've had a number this evening. They say pink is the colour of friendship, affection, and harmony.
It is now.
It isn't the colour of technical perfection, it should be said. But in honour of those fine attributes, we have decided, with the help of a laptop and a projector, that won't speak to each other to show this evening's slide in glorious pink. To offer that warning. We waited off a little bit because I noticed the bridge closed and the traffic is insane, and a number of people came in muttering under their breaths to that effect, and I know how they feel because I was caught as well. Look, it's a great pleasure for Anne and myself to welcome you all to the Irish Residence this evening for the Canadian launch of the great Famine Voices Roadshow 2019. I know for some of you it's the third time in 4 nights that we've invited you out. We're getting very cosy here, and we promise to leave you alone for a while after tonight. But tonight I think is a very important event. This roadshow is a series of open house events in the US and Canada to bring together Irish immigrants, their descendants and members of their communities to share family memories and stories of coming from Ireland to North America, especially of course relating to the period of the Great Famine and afterwards. And to tell you more about all of this evening, we're particularly delighted to welcome our distinguished guests and presenters, Carolyn Callery from the National Famine Museum at Strokestown Park in County Roscommon, Professor Mark McGowan from the University of Toronto, whose work on the famine will be familiar, I think, to many of you here, and Dr. Jason King from the Irish Heritage Trust, who will be filming your stories upstairs throughout this event, both during and after these presentations. So if people are interested in speaking with them and telling their stories, just let them know. I've been assured that he doesn't bite, so I encourage you to do that. And before I go on, I just want to say, in relation to the National Famine Museum, we often talk, some of you are here, about trips to Ireland and things that you should do there. And as somebody who's been there, and we went, myself and Anne, with our girls a couple of years ago, before we came to Canada, and it was an extraordinary experience, I have to say, an extraordinary experience. And I think Carolyn and her father and everyone involved in Strokestown have done an amazing job in giving you a sense of the story from Ireland to North America in a very tangible and very poignant way. And I certainly look forward to going back, because I know you're always adding new things, Carolyn, and I would encourage all of you on your next visit to Ireland to give the National Famine Museum a look and include it in your itinerary. My job here in Canada, as I often say, is all about promoting the Ireland-Canada relationship and all of its facets. And I'm very fortunate, and we're all very fortunate collectively, that the contemporary bilateral relationship rests on a very strong historic foundation of people-to-people links between us. Canada is a country where Irish people have always found a home away from home in good times and bad, and none worse, of course, than the Great Famine and its aftermath. The Great Famine is, of course, the most traumatic event in our long and often all too troubled history, an epic human tragedy whose scale, I think, almost defies our imagination today. 1 million lives lost and many more displaced throughout Europe and North America. And the famine permanently changed our demographic, our political, our cultural landscape, and led to a population decline which continued all the way through to the early 1960s, which I think gives us here today a sense of just how profound the impact was. But the famine is also an important part of the fabric of Canadian history, because we know that Canada was the entry point in North America for the bulk of Irish migrants fleeing the famine, even as major ports along the US East Coast banned any ship which was overcrowded or had had an outbreak of illness. So this tragedy was one that played out in Canada as well, with close to, and I hope Mark will forgive me if my figures are incorrect, but what I have here is close to 90,000 people travelling from Ireland to Canada in the year 1847 alone, many on the so-called coffin ships, and many of them, of course, didn't survive that harrowing journey, resulting in the grim legacy of more than 20,000 known Irish famine victims buried in mass graves in Canada. Now, in the role I have here, I've had the honour to visit some of those places of sacred memory. The best known, of course, is Grosse Ile, the former quarantine station on the St. Lawrence, a national Canadian historic site, an Irish famine memorial site, and indeed the largest burial site of Irish famine victims outside of the island of Ireland. Grosse Ile is close to 6,000 people, I believe, interred, whose remains are interred on the island. Anne and I visited there last summer with Minister Catherine McKenna and with the folks from Parks Canada, and it was an extraordinarily moving experience. And I know some of our, I don't know if they're here yet, but some of our friends from Parks Canada were to join us this evening. And I just want to say how impressed we were by the work that Parks Canada have done to restore and preserve the historic site, while fully respecting the sensitivities involved. And it's no easy task to do that with a living national park. But I have to say, the folks at Parks and their colleagues could not have done more to make us feel welcome to an island which occupies obviously a very, in fact I see Trevor coming down the steps now. I was just singing Parks Canada's praises, Trevor. I hope you caught that, so I will repeat it for your benefit. I was just saying how impressed when we visited Grosse Ile, how impressed we were by the work that was done to restore and preserve the historic site, fully respecting the sensitivities involved, no small task, and you and your colleagues could not have done more to make us feel welcome to a place that obviously is very special in the history of our two countries. So just to thank you for that. We can be numbed at times by the sheer, I mentioned some of them, the sheer scale of the statistics around the famine, but it's important not to lose sight of the fact that in the end, the story of the famine is the story of individual human beings. It's a tale of tragedy, but also of resilience, of survival, and even heroism, of selfless dedication to duty, of empathy and humanity too. And this, I think, and I've always felt this, is a very important part of the famine story here in Canada. The generosity of spirit shown by so many Canadians who reached out to help their afflicted fellow human beings, even at the risk not only of their own health, but their own lives. And their generosity and sacrifice will soon be honoured in a formal sense now in the Ireland Park Foundation's new Grosset Park in Toronto, which will be named for George Grosset, who was Toronto's chief surgeon in 1847, and who gave his life then treating Irish victims of famine, as many others did too. And it's a project which the Irish government is very proud to be supporting as well. The example of Grosset and so many others echoes down through the ages, and Canada indeed continues to show leadership today in its generosity of response to the needs of Syrian and other refugees. In Ireland, we are responding to that need as well, and indeed working very closely with Canada and learning from some of Canada's innovative practices, in particular the privately sponsored refugee programs. We've had our refugee sponsorship people over to look and study that, and we're now starting similar private programs in Ireland as well. So that's another tangent, if you like, between Ireland and Canada. The Irish who came here in famine times and survived the harrowing experience brought a determination and a resilience which enabled them to build new lives in their home away from home. And they and their descendants, I think it's fair to say, went on to repay that Canadian generosity of spirit by helping to build the Canada that we know today. Their legacy is found not only in monuments and memorials of the type we're familiar with, but also in the names of the towns and the streets and the people of Canada. And even although it would not have been a primary location for people coming after the famine, if you go to Newfoundland, you can hear that legacy in the accents that people speak with too. So it's the stories of those people, and indeed your family stories and memories, which our visitors tonight, I think it's fair to say, have travelled here to learn more about.